And you have all sorts of different things. Some of them are very bloggy, some of them are not at all. You have everything from the former US auto industry to lolcats, which in my opinion is the highest form of humor on the internet. So what's kind of neat is that, to me, you have sort of a marriage of functionality and design in the theme framework that WordPress provides. But previously, themes were almost just like style sheets, right? A lot of different designs, but didn't have a lot of functionality embedded in it. And often you download a theme, they'd be like, install these 5 plugins. They get comment preview and threaded comments and this and that and that. Now what's happening is the functionality is being married. So, for example, this is the monotone theme. What's interesting about this, it's a sort of a portfolio theme for photo bloggers. We have photographers here, right? Photographers? You gotta raise your lens. 1, 2. So the cool thing is that when you upload an image, like for example this image, what it actually does is it analyzes the width and height and makes the layout of it match exactly. But it also analyzes the colors. So the colors of every page are going to match the colors in the photo, just using some simple math. This is all happens in the theme, 100%, which is kind of neat when you think about it. Also because every single page on your site is custom. It has its own design, its own layout, perfectly married to the content. Which previously, computer science were always trying to separate content from presentations, MVC models, everything like that. And here we're kind of mashing it all together, and it's really neat. There's also things like WordPress TV. Has anyone checked out WordPress.tv yet? So primarily, there's 2 things. One is there's a couple hundred screencasts on it. So for example, if you wanted to explain to a friend or a client or something like that, the difference between categories and tags, there's a 2-minute screencast of the difference between categories and tags. And it's done by a guy with a really cool British accent. I know British accents aren't a big deal here, but in America they're very sexy. People get really excited. This guy gets fan mail. No one's ever, you could find him on the internet if you wanted to, but people are like, I want to see that guy. Or the voice. We also put up content from WordCamps. So, you're videoing this presentation right here. It'd be really cool if you uploaded this to WordPress.tv later, so the folks in Hong Kong or elsewhere in the world even who weren't able to make it out could check out the sessions. It's also a good example of taxonomies in action. Now, I'm not going to be able to get anywhere close here, but if you look, you see all those sort of categories on the right? Basically we have a couple taxonomies. We have a flavor taxonomy, which is .org, .com, BuddyPress, etc. A language taxonomy, so this will divide up the videos by language, so if there's something else we can filter. Producers, speakers, and then regular tags and categories, like standard WordPress. So all those taxonomies up on the top are added with 1 line of code each. This is a pretty good, if you just want to play around with something using taxonomies. Really, the only 2 sites I know of so far are mine and this one, so it's very nascent functionality. But you could use it for almost anything. One of the things I've been grabbing into records lately, like vinyl records, and it's been kind of surprising to me because I'm used to going to iTunes and just typing something in and it's there instantly. So I don't have a really good catalog of what music I have. But you can imagine a system where every record became a post, and the label was a taxonomy, and the artist was a taxonomy, and everything like that. So if I wanted to see all of the records I had that had a saxophonist, a trumpet player on Blue Note, I could do that. And that's the kind of functionality that taxonomies enables. And finally, just sort of as the last product thing, I want to talk about the next big thing. Who here has heard of BuddyPress? Anyone using it? Just out of curiosity, okay. You got a couple of early adopters here. You guys are pretty stacked. This is an example of a BuddyPress homepage. So it's basically, BuddyPress is a set of plugins for WordPress Avenue. This particular site has about 15,000 blogs on it. The latest posts from all of them are drawn into the front page here on the left. And on the right, what you have is some functionality around who are the newest members, who's the most popular people, groups, everything. And of course, every single member has a profile page. It's all the stuff you've seen a million times in social networks. Recent photos, the wires like a Facebook wall, groups, private messaging, much everything you can imagine. Just out here, what's the popular social network here in Hong Kong? Facebook? Cool. I like Facebook myself. So it's kind of, all the functionality that you've grown to expect from all these other things. What's interesting about this is you kind of have an open source Facebook in a box, right? So traditionally open source or networks, social networking has been about getting everyone in one place, right? 5 years ago it was Friendster, then it was MySpace, now it's Facebook. They're adding like 170,000 new members a day, and they try to get everyone on it, and then they connect it with folks. I think that model is sort of waning a little bit. Certainly not by their growth numbers, but just by that's not how the internet works. The internet's not about centralization, it's about decentralization. It's about everyone owning their own content, their own, controlling their own domain, so to speak. And if you look at recent controversies like Facebook's terms of service saying they own everything forever and ever, things like that, honestly, I don't fault them for this because that's how a company works. But it does sort of underline that essentially you're a digital sharecropper in someone else's field when you use these services. So what if, though, instead of one giant social network, there were thousands, or hundreds of thousands, all running open source software, and all using open standards so they can connect to each other, if you so choose. I have no idea what happens when we do that. We're going to see, because WordPress is going 1.0 very, very soon, coinciding with the release of WordPress 2.7.1. And it will do all that. Well, it's version 1.0, so it'll do like 10% of that. But over time, we now have a truly open source base, rather than building on something like Ning or one of these other proprietary systems to experiment with this. We had a question over here.
Yeah, I was going to just ask you about that. How do you, what's the overview on Ning versus WordPress?
I think Ning is like a super cool site, right? They have amazing functionality. For those of you who don't know, Ning essentially allows you to create a social network on top of Ning. And they have like a programming layer that you can program, and it's a hosted service stuff, so they handle all the hosting, the memberships, the emails, all the stuff that you don't want to worry about. But it's kind of like trading one proprietary thing for another. If you're going to take the hassle to switch off a proprietary thing, go to something that you'll be able to stay on for a generation, which is open source. To me, open source is the future of all software. Proprietary software is dead or dying all over the world. And so if you really want to build something that'll last a long time, you should do it on open source. My personal bias and opinion, but so that's what's coming with this. You can go to testbp.org if you want to try out the software. This is just a demo site. But what's actually really cool is that we've started using BuddyPress, the power of buddypress.org, which is kind of neat. So those of you who know particularly WordPress.org, everything's spread out everywhere. So with BuddyPress, we're able to do using the software is bring in forum posts and blog posts and track contributions and SVN commit logs and everything and unify it into your profile, which I think is a good example of this sort of software in action. What's most interesting is that people have started to use BuddyPress on this testbp site to sort of accelerate its own development. So we do lots of experiments. BuddyPress was one guy working in Vancouver for about 8 or 9 months. And most of the time they don't take off. That's just sort of the nature of experiments. But when I started seeing people using the software to develop the software, and it started mirroring, it's actually sort of where WordPress was about 2 years in already. I was completely blown away. It's sort of like we're approaching the singularity of computers writing their own code or something. But the most important question in everything is why. I've talked a lot of what's, what we're doing, what we've done, where we've been, everything like that, but why are we doing this stuff? Well, I can't answer the question for all of you, but for me personally, it's about freedom. Open source inherently has sort of a bill of rights. Every time you use an open source piece of software, you get a set of freedoms attached to it. There's 3 of them that I like to talk about. One is the freedom to use the software for any purpose, meaning that if you want to do it for commercial use, non-commercial use, if you want to start, a pro-mat site, an anti-mat site, you can. You don't have to ask my permission or anyone else's in the world. You can do whatever you like with it. There's the freedom to change the software to suit your needs. We sort of take this for granted because you can view all the source code in WordPress. But, traditionally in the computer world, it's all about binaries. You can't see inside of how something works, which means you can't even start to modify it. And then even if you could